Hello iPaaS developers. In this video, we are going to see what is REST services and its concepts and best practices. Let's see. Before going to the web service, we need to understand web application. So previously, the client server communication happened via web applications. So what is web application? So web application is created with web technologies and runs via web browser. So in different programming language, they created the web application and deployed into one web server or web container, and all the clients can access that web application through browser. This application has this authentication, authorization, then handling the assets and logging the messages and auditing. So everything is included as part of the single web application. Or changing anything, it will be very difficult and complex. So they created the web services. Instead of building everything in a single application, they want to separate. So they want to separate the data and the UI part. So the UI part is client side. So they created UI in the application, and the data interaction between the server moved to the web services. So the web services is listening the request at a particular port over the network or internet, and it's serving the documents, the data in HTML format or JSON format or images XML format as well. So this is called as APIs. So application programming interfaces. Previously, we have web application that is used by users, but these APIs are created for the applications. One application want to connect and send the data to another application. It is communicating via these APIs. When we are talking about web application, all the human users go and interact with this application. So there is a web page, so they will go and submit the data in form to create record in this web application. Here, this is converted as a API. So the user or human is not going to use this APIs. They will use the front-end application, but the front-end application will use this API to push the data to the back-end application. So the user is using phone or laptop or any other cloud applications. So the data is getting the data from the user in the applications, and this application called this APIs, and this API will insert the data into database and give the response. The user get the update in their client applications. Now we are coming to the REST service. REST service is type of web service. So we have SOAP web service and REST web services. We are going to see about REST web services. REST stands for representational state transfer. So this is not a protocol. This is architecture design for the web services. It uses the HTTP as a protocol, but REST is not a protocol. It is architecture design. It is used for this stateless communication. It is used for the client server based interaction, and it support different data format. So here we are talking about stateless communication. So in earlier web application and all, when they are maintaining some security, so they have to maintain for each user, they have to maintain the session and pass the session for each and every request. So here in REST service, they remove that session. So every request is considered as a stateless, which means every request considered as new request. So if they want to maintain any session or authentication, they have to pass in every request. Here we are seeing what are the methods and parameters in REST services. So we have 5 different methods: get, post, put, patch, and delete. So get method to retrieve the data or read data from the system. Post method is to create the resource, which means to create record in the system. Put is to update resource, and patch is to update resource partially, and delete is to remove the resources. So if you take an example, if you are creating one employee data, so if you want to get all the employee data, we can create the REST API with the get method. If you want to create employee in the target system, then we have to go with the post method. If you are updating existing employee with all the details of the employee, so in that case we have to go for put method. If you are updating certain fields, in that case we have to go for patch. If you are deleting that employee, then we can go for the delete method. Then parameters. So in REST APIs we have two different parameters. One is query parameter and URI parameter. So query parameters are passed in the request as part of the URL, and URI parameter is passed as part of the URL only, but both are having two different syntax. Let's see that. Before that, we will go for this methods. Get method, as I mentioned, this is used to retrieve the resource users, that is the resource path. So which is accept application slash JSON. We are giving the content type as application slash JSON. Then we will get the user details from the system in JSON format. Next method is post. Post method is used to create user. So here users is a resource path, but the method is post. Here we are passing the XML payload as a body. So this user will be created in the target system. So once the user created, then you can pass this information as part of the REST response, or you can pass the user data inserted successfully. Next method is put to update the entire resource. So here we are passing same user data, but we are passing ID and name. So it will be updated based on this ID. The name will be updated based on this ID. Delete method. The delete method is used to delete the resource in the system. So if you pass this users, then user ID, the user data will be deleted from the target system. Next, we are moving to this patch method. So it is used. The patch method is used to update parts of a resource. In the user name only, then we can use patch method. Now we are going to see these parameters, REST parameters. So we have seen two type of parameters, query parameters and URI parameters. So here, so V1 is a version, API users, then user ID equal to 101. So we do query the user data based on the user ID. We can pass multiple parameters in a single request by giving this ampersand separator. So username equal to Selva and active equal to true. Use the query parameter to sort the records or for the paginations as well. Then URI parameters. So URI parameters is part of URL, not separated by this key value pair. It's only the values passed as part of the URL. These are the content types supported in REST APIs. Commonly, we use application slash JSON or application slash XML. Application slash SOAP plus XML may be used for this SOAP services. And these are all the different content type used in REST APIs. REST, when we are designing this REST services, we can design in two ways. One is synchronous service, another one is asynchronous services. So what is synchronous? So synchronous service is getting response and giving response to the client. So all the processing needs to be completed and the response is given to the client. So till that time, client wait for the response. It is blocking. It is called a blocking operation because it process one request, and once all this process completed, then it will give the response. It is used for the simple request and response model, and it is used for the real-time queries. So for example, get services and all, it needs to give the response to the client. So we can go for synchronous services. Asynchronous services is used the scenarios where the client doesn't wait for the response. and we need to process all the requests in non-blocking way. So in that cases, we can go for asynchronous REST services. So it can be used for this long running task and responses via callback or polling. So the client pass the request, then they won't wait. So this is, and they will get the response via callback by giving the session ID or the correlation ID to get the particular response. In that way also we can define. Asynchronous services are called fire and forget. So it's request triggered and it won't wait for the response. Let's see the security in REST APIs. So these are all the authentications supported in REST APIs and commonly used in REST APIs. So basic authentication, which is username password based authentication. Then API key based authentication. In this authentication, the client needs to pass API key. So the key validated first. Once the key is valid, then only the request is processed. Then OAuth 2 is another authentication. Then JWT is a JSON Web Token. That is also type of authentication used in REST APIs. Authorization, we can give access to different resources based on their role and user to access the particular REST API resources. For example, one user can have access to query the data, retrieve the data from the system. Another user needs to have access both retrieve and update the record. So we can create two different kind of authorization and give to the users. Here we are talking about transport security and best practices. So we have to use HTTPS and TLS for the transport level security. So we can encrypt the data in before sending in the request. It will prevent the man in the middle attack. And the best practice is it is recommended to go HTTPS always. Then validate the input data. So when you are getting request, validate the data, validate the request against the schema. So you can define the schema of the request and you can validate against. If it is invalid, then you don't need to process. You can throw the error. Then rate limiting throttling. These are all the best practices to avoid multiple requests to the same services. So when we are getting multiple requests or concurrent requests at the same time, this services may go down. So to avoid that, we have to apply this rate limiting or throttling. So these are all part of API manager. So we have API gateway or API manager concept. So we will add those policies in the API manager and we will maintain. Then use of proper HTTP status code. So when you are designing this REST API, you have to give proper response code to the client so that they will understand the responses from our API. Then do not expose the sensitive data. So the common HTTP status code in REST APIs. So 200 for OK, 201 for resource created, 400 for bad request, 401 for unauthorized, 403 for forbidden, and 404 for resource not found. 500 is internal server error, 503 for service unavailable. Let's see REST APIs in iPaaS. In iPaaS, they have components to create REST APIs and expose them over internet. iPaaS product has inbuilt product or another product called API Manager or API Gateway, which is used to create APIs and manage those APIs, which is not exposing the actual service endpoint to the consumers. So this API gateways receive the request from different applications and it will validate. So in the API Manager, they can add security rules, authorization, authentication. We can add everything in the API Manager. So if the authentication success, then this API Manager route the request to the actual REST API. If there is any error in the authentication, then the API manager block this request. And we can apply the rate limiting, throttling, those policies in the API manager to avoid concurrent requests to the REST APIs. So what are the best practices to create REST API? So you have to use nouns in the URLs, and always better to use these versions. And we have to handle this error in the API and give the proper error messages with the error codes. Then documentation. So good documentation is required. So we can give this Swagger or OpenAPI spec or RAML. So using this Swagger API or OpenAPI spec, they can create API in the API manager. So when you are creating REST API in iPaaS platform, so you have to give this API documentation via this OpenAPI spec, so that in API manager they will create APIs and route to the particular REST. To the conclusion, so REST is simple, scalable, and widely adopted. It is architecture design, not a protocol. It supports secure communication, and it is flexible with asynchronous and synchronous pattern. The REST APIs are foundation for modern APIs. Let's see how to create REST services in different integration platform in coming videos. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, share, and provide your comments. If you need more videos, subscribe to our channel. Thank you.